Today, we're looking at a purple ink by Montegrappa Violet. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that you can skip around to the parts you're most interested in, or if you watch the whole thing, I'd appreciate you. You can follow me on Instagram, and if you're new here and like fountain pen inks as much as I do, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I inked up this Duke 209 with a Fude nib. I used it to write for a day. That was sometimes challenging. I then used it to take the notes for this video. I always standardize some of my writing samples by using Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, although I do use more papers, and some of those will be seen later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it comes in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, quite a bit of ghosting for Clairfontaine. Honestly, that's probably some of the most ghosting that we've seen. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 7 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine and stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 8 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it, and we didn't get it. Tomoe River, hold your horses. Slow down. There's a gift. There's a gift under here. Holy bleeding. Holy bleeding, Batman. This ink is bleeding into, but not entirely through, Tomoe River paper. This is extreme ghosting because of that amount of bleed. Oh my God. This was a huge warning sign for me of bad things to come. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 12 seconds to dry. That might tell us right there that that's an aggressive ink. 12 seconds on Tomoe River. Medium, same tone as the extra fine and the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 15 seconds to dry. Another warning sign, 15 seconds to dry on Tomoe River. The scrubby for both show us no color variation because there is none. Rhodia, no bleeding, quite a bit of ghosting dealing with Rhodia. It's normally not this bad. It's quite a bit for Rhodia, but it's not like it's horrible or the end of the world here. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine, same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Medium, same tone as the extra fine and the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and we get none. I agree with Vita. I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And initially this looks like a pure purple that's really just pushing its way up from lighter to darker as it's moving away from the water. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now we do see some of that purple immediately set into that filter paper, but not as bad as we have with some permanent inks. So it does look like there can be some resistance to this ink, but I think the resistance is going to have more to do with some of the bleed that we saw in the Tomoe River. Now it does push up with that purple, but very interesting, on the right side at the top, we see a pink that's there. So there is pink in this purple. That's not really doing a whole lot for it as a color. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself very well. It's got no real problems with it. It goes ahead and gets highlighted unaffected, making this a good ink to use in a note-taking situation as long as your paper can handle the ink. Water is lifting the darker tones away from this paper, but it's leaving an awful lot behind. pen flush is doing about the same that water did, not a whole lot more. The 1/3 bleach solution is completely removing it from the paper. Now it's leaving a little bit of a staining behind on the paper, but that was only 30 seconds. I did not need to use bleach to get this out of my pen. I think it bonds with the paper very quickly, and it gets in there very deep, which is the reason that water and pen flush had trouble. I didn't have any trouble getting this out of my pen. I test for viscosity or flow using a thing called a tilt test. I will link how I do that, the video of it, down below or up in the cards. I also then put it onto a standard distribution so it's more easily seen with all of the inks that I've tested. Now, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Montegrappa's Violet has a viscosity of 3.54, making this a very dry ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those, and for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Montegrappa's Violet has an average dry time of 10 seconds. Now, it's a dry ink that dries very quickly, but I think it's not that it dries very quickly, it's that it seeps into the paper. It penetrates its way in very fast. Instead of finding inks that look like Montegrappa's Violet, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. So I went with a nice black, one of my favorite blacks, Noodler's Dark Matter. The second writing sample is done on P. Berger, black and red, and leather. Here we're looking at P. Berger paper, a lovely French rule student grade paper. Oh yes, bleeding. Yes, it touches the page underneath a lot. Not good. Leave it at that. The 1.1 has feathering all over it, tiny little feathers the whole way through. No spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub. It has feathering, tiny little feathers all over it. It's easier to spot spots without feather than it is to spot just where there's some feathering. Like the B in brown doesn't have very much feathering at all, but everything else feathered. Just needs to be tarred first. No spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 2 seconds to dry. Medium, same tone as the extra fine and the stub, and yes, feathered the whole way through. It's gross. No spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 2 seconds to dry. I'm going to move on past this. Scrubby shows no color variation, and there was none. How about black and red notebooks? No bleeding, no ghosting. We're seeing some nice performance here with black and red. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 3 seconds to dry. The medium is ever so slightly darker than the extra fine or the stub. It has no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and we didn't get any. Levenger. Here's a paper that's not had problems with fountain pen inks. Now we do have spots where it's really starting to get deeper into the page, and considering I've never had a problem with this much show through, which isn't enough show through to stop you from using the back, but it's just to take note because this is a very well produced paper and it began to have some show through and it really seeped into this page. The same ink that really got into that Tomoe River paper. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 5 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation. We didn't expect it and we didn't get it. And that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Montegrappa Violet? This is a surprisingly aggressive ink. It really bled through a lot of papers that I put it onto, which I was honestly shocked by. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? Well, to protect your notes, you would need to use a very fine, very dry pen because of how aggressive this ink is. I put out a new ink review every single day, so that if you're not already subscribed, I'm going to remind you, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.